step one. Step two is really about, when we all think about being children, ice cream, the ice cream truck, those moments of joy, making it better, making, if a kid's crying, you give him an ice cream, he's happy. It really, to me, became the perfect catalyst or vehicle for doing good in the world.
Welcome to the Impact Multiplier CEO podcast. I'm Richard Metcalf, founder of X Quadrant, and my mission is to help the world's top CEOs and entrepreneurs shift from incremental to exponential progress and create a huge positive impact on our world. Now, that requires you to reinvent yourself and transform your business. So, if you're ready to play a bigger game than ever before, I invite you to join us and become an Impact Multiplier CEO. In this episode, I speak with James Boettcher, who is the chief executive of Righteous Gelato, a leading Canadian, basically ice cream company. Although he probably wouldn't want me to use the word ice cream because gelato actually is a higher quality, lower sugar version of ice cream. James has built his business out as a real force for good. He's really focused on corporate culture. In fact, he describes himself as Chief Empowerment Officer because he's so focused on creating a gem of a culture where employees are truly valued. And in this episode, we dive into how do you do that without creating an entitlement mentality? How do you value employees without them leaning back and exploiting it in certain ways? We then dive into how he runs his one-to-one meetings, the questions he asks to create a coaching culture rather than perhaps as many leaders can do, almost a kind of a micromanaging and culture that actually disempowers people. So if you're struggling to get the best out of your people, if you want them to lean in a bit more, really listen in to his questions, because I think you'll find a couple of gems in there for you. So this is a great conversation with James on empowering leadership. I hope you enjoy it. Hi, James, and welcome to the show.
Hey, Richard. Thanks for having me.
So this is going to be fun. I know that over the last 14 years, you've built up Righteous Gelato. Along the way, you've picked up a string of awards. You had a 40 Under 40 award, Entrepreneur of the Year, Canada's Most Admired Corporate Cultures. You recently got the Real Leaders Impact Award as well. And so I know that you are somebody who sees business as a force for good. And so I suppose my opening question is, if you want to make a positive impact in the world, like why ice cream? I mean, really, is that?
Sure.
Why start there?
Yeah, gelato, ice cream, potato, we'd say in Canada. But I think there's two, maybe three parts to that. One is I always say gelato chose me. So I took over a very small scoop shop that is, no longer, but that's sort of where this started. I was doing freelance design in my younger days and they were a client. And I found this magic around being in the store and this theater of it being made and just the energy of community that really sort of was the catalyst for this decision to, forge ahead with taking over this ice cream shop, quote unquote. The ironic part is in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, where I live. It's winter for like 6 months of the year. So I wasn't very bright in my mid 20s to do that. But lo and behold, the business has changed and we're now in grocery stores as sort of our main business. So that's sort of step one. Step two is really about, when we all think about being children, ice cream, the ice cream truck, those moments of joy, making it better, making, if a kid's crying, you give him an ice cream, he's happy. It really, to me, became the perfect catalyst or vehicle for doing good in the world. And then third is I really believe that inherently change in the world is very rarely brought upon by governments. It's generally individuals that are passionate about something or businesses that decide that they're going to operate with that type of integrity, like Patagonia, for example, or perhaps Ben and Jerry's, all these wonderful companies that really sort of, carved a path and led the way in saying, we don't have to be a capitalist empire. We can be sustainable in a lot of ways and do a lot of good in the world. So.
Yeah, it's nice. I can picture it as this little gem of a business, right? Where you're creating a high quality product and doing it well. I suppose what's interesting to me is I could imagine having another interview on this podcast with somebody who says, I'm on a mission, for like healthy eating. We've got to get rid of all these ice creams, this chocolate. That's the good I want to do in the world is kind of stop people putting sugar in their bodies and this kind of stuff. So I kind of, again, am curious how you kind of think about that. You've probably come across that yourself in this journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, it's an interesting one. I think like all things, including, sugar or wine or anything you ingest, even probably spinach at some point. It's really about everything in moderation. And that's the great thing about our product is that, it's so delicious that you only need a little bit to enjoy it. So you're not, mowing down on a full pint. Some people do because it's so delicious. But also, our product has less sugar than a lot of other products based on our formulations. And, I think if we got too caught up in that, we wouldn't have the opportunity to do as much good. So when you sort of narrow the niche too much, then you really don't expand yourself to that. So I think at the end of the day, we talk about it all the time as a team. We'll offer no sugar added products and so on and so forth. But sugar is, unfortunately, I think in a way, very delicious. And we're okay to have some, we're not opposed to having a little bit in our diet.
Yeah, I'm just provoking you really, right? I mean,
I like it.
I live in France. Come on, I'm stuffing myself with cheese and sugar and ice cream.
I'm a big fan of sugar. Just don't eat lots of it. There's lots of sugars not to eat. We use organic cane sugar in our products, so we're the best of the best. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So I know you have a phrase which is business is not business. What's that about?
Yeah, business is not business. I think too often the phrase when difficult decisions are being made by leaders, you're in a situation where it's like it's just business, or we have to do what the business needs. And I think early on in my life, my grandmother had a catering company, and business is people. Every part of it is people, and I think it's the customers or fans that you serve. They're people. The suppliers you work with, they're all people. They provide you something, but they're people as well, and they should be treated with dignity and respect. The people that you employ, especially, they're humans that have decided I could choose any job in the world. And really, we live in an age where you can do anything. I'm always fascinated by the influencer career now. It's a real thing. People can go and get free stuff and get paid to talk about it online in a very authentic way. And so the reality of the business part of it is that, we're always interacting with people. And so if we make decisions with that type of approach and inherent responsibility that we're dealing with people, I think it'll serve us really well. Someone said something that was really interesting to me the other day. They said, when a salesman sells a company something, so a supplier will say, and he does it because he's got to meet his targets, but he knows it's not the right solution for somebody, or it really won't do what they need. He's putting that other person that sort of signed off on it, their career in jeopardy. And they don't really realize that, So if there's a piece of equipment that's procured, this happens in my business, and my team in operations does it. We run a very, holistic company, so no one's losing their job over anything. But a lot of companies, if someone made a mistake because a salesman sold that person's career is in jeopardy, and all they were trying to do was make the number, and they weren't really thinking about all the downstream effects and all the people, not the business part of it. So
yeah, it's a great example. Very good example. When I looked at your website earlier on, I noticed, you put the whole thing about people right on the front, right? It says whatever it says, our people make our gelato, not the other way around, or words to this effect, which is great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We just happen to make gelato, is what we say. We just happen to make gelato. It's like if we made staplers or picture frames, I don't know, I'll pick a bunch of random products to make, we'd still have a great company. They would be world class. They'd have the best service. They would stand up to what you expected them to do. And along the way, we'd make great decisions on how we procure the supplies and have a lot of fun with it. So
yeah, I love it. So I guess my question for you is, how do you put people first, and like your employees first, and avoid the sense of entitlement? Because I've seen other leaders really struggle with this, right? They provide great environments, they provide great benefits, and it's almost like the more we give them, the more they seem to want, right? Like they're never satisfied, in fact, and that by almost feeding the monster. So I'm kind of curious because it sounds like I suspect you've had a good balance. What have you found?
Yeah. Richard, I would imagine that you were raised pretty well. Am I correct?
I would hope so. I would hope so.
And do you have children?
I do.
Okay. And do you feel like you're raising them pretty good? No sense of entitlement. They've values.
Yeah. Well, I think they've just happened to. I've just happened to be very, very lucky with my children. They seem to be raising themselves.
You think it's luck? I like that.
Well, I don't tell them that. Obviously, secretly, I just tell them I'm the perfect dad, and they owe it all to me.
You're going to listen to this and say, we really like that ice cream guy, James from Canada. What I'm highlighting is that culturally, sort of what we tolerate is really what comes of our ecosystem. So when I look at a corporate culture, there's so many starting points where it can go awry. To your point, so if your hiring practice doesn't sort of vet that early on in it, so you're just looking for top talent, you don't care if they're what we call a disagreeable giver. Adam Grant came up with that, or disagreeable taker. If you're in a situation where along the way you're not sort of re-correcting the ship when things are going awry in terms of culture, I think it really starts so early on in the culture. And I think a culture is often easily described as it's what goes on when no one is looking. So it's like a Henry Ford quote, quality means doing it right when no one's looking. That's on the wall at Righteous. But the reality is that, if someone were to walk in there and there's no bosses there and whatever, what would they see if they were just, a ghost and they saw how people were cleaning or how they were treating one another or all those things? And I think we do an amazing job early on in the process finding great people, making them feel like they have such deep belonging. So we do all these onboarding things of where they have to ask people in the company fun facts, and there's a lot of connection to leadership, and including me, where every team member that ever gets hired sits down for founder coffee and we just connect. I ask them questions about them. They ask me about why did you choose gelato and what's your favorite flavor? So some good questions. But really, I think to your point about leaders struggling with it, it's like if your kids were like always misbehaving, and then you came along and you said, you know what? I think if I give them a bunch of ice cream, they're going to behave better. It's like the inverse. Like the starting point has to be teaching great behaviors, saying what you tolerate, what you expect, treating people like, I always say, treat them like adults or treat them like people. And then anytime it goes awry, where there's something that goes wrong, you have a really clear conversation. Clear is kind. That's a Brene Brown thing. It's really important to have those conversations. So we have a thing, unlimited vacation. After 1 year, every team member gets this. It's different sometimes for manufacturing teams, but with our administration team. And someone said, how do you not have the team abuse that? And I say, well, they don't. And they're like, well, what if they do? I was like, well, they don't. I don't know what you want me to say. And what I realized is that it's a bit of a deep care for one another within the organization. Patrick Lencioni is one of my favorite authors, and he talks about this. Accountability is really not to the leader. It's to the rest of the team. And when the rest of the team has an innate, deep sense of accountability for one another, they won't do that because they don't want to let one another down. They don't want to fail one another. And so our organization operates, it's like, this is how we do it. This is the culture, like your parents raised you and you raise your children. This is how we do things. We're polite. We say thank you. We put our knife and fork this way. We don't, swear at adults, all the things you taught your kids, I'm sure. And when people come into the organization, they generally have a good sense. I always say people are inherently good. Do not make rules and regulations for the one person that screwed it up once upon a time, because then you're in it for everybody. And I think, in a bit of an ecosystem of our team, that's really the mentality, is that, one person doesn't want to ruin it for the rest of them.
So have you had examples where you've had to have tough conversations to really enforce those standards?
I mean, tough conversations are probably, I look at them different than probably a lot of leaders. I think a lot of skills, especially the ability to have tough conversations, are like muscles. And so you have to flex them often. And then they sort of build up this resiliency. Resiliency is another one. You've got to flex a muscle, which is why we've survived sort of our history, we'll say. But the reality is that when you have them very naturally, it's way easier, and people respect you so much when they know where they stand, you know? Like, I heard a lesson early on in my leadership, which was, do you want to be liked or respected? And I thought about it, and as a young man, I didn't have a lot of friends, and I struggled with sort of getting bullied. So my natural sort of tendency is to want to be liked. And what I realized is that if you are respected and you treat people really well, like you would want to be treated, they will like you way more because they respect you. They're not going to be the person that likes you and sort of takes advantage of you. And so I think that the tough conversations that have happened over time are, we really, the team's addressed that we really need to work through this problem. Can we work together? I always say, how can I help? That's literally my mechanism of discipline. Like, what am I missing in this equation, or my leadership, or my guidance that I could help you with, regardless of, if they're, a team member that just joined us or they're a senior leader. And I think that really has served me well. We have a couple things going on in the business right now that are requiring some of those tough conversations. And what I'm so amazed by is that the leaders that lead the people that are having some challenges are saying things the way that I would say them, if at the same or if not better. And so there's been this cultural adoption of, I'm going to be honest with this person. I'm going to be clear about it. I'm going to say why, like, what are we missing here, and confront the issue so that we can resolve it. Because if we sort of just let it exist, then it's just going to continue to happen. It's like they expect what you tolerate seeing, right? So a lot of isms I'm sharing.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's coming to my mind is, first of all that, you don't shy away from that, despite wanting that people first culture. It doesn't mean it's a soft, completely soft, right? Because you want to have those conversations, but it's about establishing those expectations, but then having a coaching mindset. So I wanted to come on to that because you talk about asking questions, right? How can I help? What am I missing? I know that you've said that I think one of your superpowers might be asking questions to help point out the things that no one else sees. So I'm wondering kind of, how do you do that? And like, when do you use that skill? Like, when does that come out?
Yeah. Early on in my leadership, because of the urgency of survival, we'll almost say, I would solve a lot of problems on others' behalf. So something would go awry and I would just say, hey, I can get that done. And two things happen as a leader. One, you feel valuable. This is, I would say, the general trait of why that happens. It's like you feel like you're valuable, like you did something, you're important.
Definitely. Yeah. It's adding too much value normally, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Leadership is very much about the neurons in your brain, and other jobs are generally about the outcome that you built, right? So I did this. Here's it. I always say, like, trades is the greatest career ever, because you frame homes. It's like, there was a piece of land and now there's a home. Look, I'm accomplished, Whereas leaders, it's like, we don't really know where we're at. So we might grab on to solving things. And so I learned early on that was not going to serve me well in terms of growing the business and teaching other people and learning myself also. I think that's a big thing that's underrated by leaders, is the more that you ask good questions, the more you learn. And so over my tenure in the organization, realizing the capacity and capability and generally the intelligence of the people I get to work with, they would know an answer that was probably better than the answer I thought of in the moment. And so asking good questions actually created a better outcome. And it takes discipline. It takes curiosity, is a big sort of conversation within our organization. Even in Slack, we've got a curious emoji that we created, and then allowing people to leverage their own superpower. So if they're a systems thinker or a calibrator or an empath, what are the things they can bring to the table while you're trying to solve issues within the organization. Because if you just hire a bunch of people and sort of program them to do what you want, I don't think you're ever really going to get your full potential in the business, but also they won't realize their full potential. And that's really where the magic happens.
So what would be your mini masterclass or mini guide on what kind of questions will draw that out of people? So like, to think about that, you're going through, someone's talking about something that perhaps they're asking you to solve the problem for them. What would be your go-to?
Well, I'll give you a few that are coming up here after this call. So on the first Wednesday of the month, I have my one-on-ones with my direct reports. So they have 90 minutes, and it's really their agenda. And first question is an EO thing, which is like name and number, or word and number. And the idea is, you're just sharing where you're at. So if you've had like a tough week or whatever, we sort of calibrate to that. So I think understanding where people are at. So I would say first question I would ever ask somebody is how are you doing? And the name and number thing gives you sort of 2 points for them to be honest. Because if I'm like, Richard, how are you doing? You're like, James, great. I'm just glad to see you. But like an hour ago, someone hit your car in the front of your house. Like you weren't honest about that. So if I say word and number, you might say 7 and frustrated. And I'll be like, what happened? And then you'd share. So expand. The next one is in one-on-ones, which I think is the greatest question I've ever learned to use. And this is an Andy Grove thing is, what's the best use of our time today? So I can run through a bunch of things and we can talk about your KPIs and we use an OGSM model. So we can talk about where you're at on your goals. But if you've got something that's just burning inside of you and we don't address that really early on in the conversation, oh man, we're going to like spend a lot of time just wasting time. And at the end, you're going to say, I got this problem I got to deal with, and we don't have enough time. So what's the best use of our time today is a big one.
I hope you're enjoying this conversation. This is just a quick interlude to introduce you to 2 transformative programs that we run. The first is Rivendell, my exclusive group of top CEOs who are committed to transforming themselves, their businesses, and the world. It's an incredible peer group and a deep coaching experience that will push you to new heights, no matter how successful you've already been. The second is Impact Accelerator, a coaching program for executives who are ready to make a big leap forward in their own leadership. It's regularly described as life-changing, and no other program provides such personal, strategic clarity, a measurable shift in stakeholder perceptions, and a world-class leadership development environment. Find out about both of these programs at xquadrant.com/services. Now back to the conversation. Can I actually just weigh in there?
Yeah, please.
I love it. I often ask my own, my CEO entrepreneur coaching clients when I'm working with them, or setting big goals and things. But I would generally ask them, what's the most valuable conversation we can possibly have, which is basically the same thing. The nuance, though, is actually sometimes the most valuable conversation we need to have is 1 or 2 clicks deeper than what they can say. So for me, it's a great initial question, but I would never kind of take it as read, but kind of probe a little bit.
And I like that. I think the more you give people preparation too. So like you say you were coaching me and you gave me that question. Hey, on Wednesday, we're going to meet and I'm going to ask you this question. I would now have time to say, what is that? Whereas if you ask me sort of on the spot, I might be like, I would come up with an answer because I have to come up with answers sometimes. But I think that's where you get a couple of clicks deep. It's deep. It's like 5 whys, right? It's like, why did this happen? But really, why did it happen? And it's, deductive reasoning and problem solving. I think Jeff Bezos was very famous for that within Amazon. But a couple other ones I like to ask is, what am I missing? So say there's a problem. This will happen in like operations or supply chain often. Something's not going the way it should. And I'm like, I can see the answer. I know the answer. And instead of blurring out the answer, because I might not know it, I have an assumption around the answer. I'd say, what am I missing? And they'd be like, well, what do you mean? And I was like, well, there's clearly something here that is missing. And so then we talk through perhaps some of the details that got missed in whatever we're trying to solve. So what am I missing is a good question.
So just to be clear, you say what I'm missing, even though you feel you aren't missing anything. Is that what you're saying? You feel you know the answer? But you say, what are you missing in terms of getting them to think about what they're missing?
So imagine, I'm just going to use an example. Imagine I said, send me one of those books behind you. Looks like a cool book. Send me one of those books. Oh, James, it's going to take so long, like blah, blah, blah. And I'm over here and you're over there. And I'm like, you just put it in the mail, dude. Like you just put it in the mail, pay a little extra and I'll get it. I promise. Like, it's a miracle, but I'll get it. And then, instead of telling you that, I would just say, what am I missing? And then imagine what you really were going to tell me that you didn't tell me was, this is the last copy of the book I have. I can't send it to you. So you over-explained something to sort of camouflage what was really going on, but I didn't know that. I'm like, just put it in the mail. Like that's the cheap answer, right? So I say that a lot too. Whether I'm coaching someone in my business or mentoring outside. I say, this advice is only as valuable as you paid for it, which is $0. So take it for that amount. Because I think too often people with experience, quote unquote, leaders are giving a lot of feedback and not realizing the consequence of it. So again, say I told you your book cover should be blue and you thought I was the greatest person in the world, the best book cover person in the world. You would change it to blue. But what the hell do I know? Like, I don't know who your demographic is. I don't know anything about your book. And I think that's a sad thing I see often is that someone sees somebody exalted in power. It happens in parenting for sure. But it's like, the answer is just a off the cuff thing and people take it as, gospel, we'll say in a way. So.
Yeah, that's great. So we've got word and number. What's the best use of our time? What am I missing? Anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up this little section on?
Yeah, I like it. And I would say the last one, which I shared earlier, was just asking people how you can help. I think that I heard a COO a while back say, the day I realized that my job was to help people solve problems, my job was so freeing. So he used to get so frustrated because there's always problems, right? In a business, that's what we do. We create more problems. And he said, the moment I realized that my job was to do that, the day no problems exist is the day I lose my job. I realized, saying, how can I help as a leader is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself, first of all, because you're now solving the problem, not talking about the problem. But you're also showing how much you care about your team.
Yeah, that's great. Let me just dive deep into that one a little bit. How do you avoid in that situation something which I do see sometimes happen, which is that the leader ends up taking away many more actions than the staff member, right? In other words, like, how can I help you? Well, you can help me by like giving me a much better strategy, and also I need more, resources. And can you talk to marketing because they're really lousy right now? And and actually, would you mind, just doing this deliverable for me? Because blah blah blah. Exaggerating, but there can be a case where that kind of servant-hearted leadership ends up kind of the tables get turned almost. Have you ever experienced that or felt that tension?
Yeah, I don't just. Yeah. Two funny things I want to point out, Richard. You're bringing up all these CEO nightmares, I would say, and a lot of us live them at different.
I should do a TV series, CEO Nightmares. I should.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, just CEOs waking up in the middle of the night. And then the other part of it is, like I said before, is that whatever challenges we encounter as leaders, it's often cultural, and it comes back to sort of what we've already what the understanding is going into it, or maybe the culture they served under in their last business. I see that a lot where people come in and they have expectations, good or bad, and you just got to work through them. But what I would say to that one, and this is going to be funny, my team will really enjoy listening to this one. But I say, give me something to say yes to. So say, Richard, same thing you said, I need this, that, and the other thing. I would say, give me something to say yes to. Because you might tell me that you need X amount of dollars for something. Right now we're talking about, influencer strategy or something like that. And I'd just say, well, like how much and how do we want to use it? And what's our best use of that? Because too often I think people are limiting their problem solving skills by saying something's not available. So budgets generally constrain things, right? We can't do that. And again, back to asking why is once you get a few layers down, you sort of discover all the answers within the reasons we can't. And I love that. I love when people, you see their eyes light up because they're like, well, if we had $10,000, I could do this, blah, 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 blah. And they sort of give me something to say yes to. I say, cool, we'll take $10,000 out of this budget and move it to that. You just gave me something to say yes to. And then they're like, oh, shoot, that's all I, had to do. So I think, again, we've hired, this is a recent aha moment, but we've hired people to do a job. And there's sort of this fine line where we think that they know everything they should know and they should just come in. They should be experts, right? But it's not like framing a house or painting a house. Jobs that are sort of A to B, they're pretty clear. When you involve strategy, there's so much creative thinking and a different approach that has to happen. And I think that when you start to unleash the problem solving, creative thinking of people, they're, like I said, they're already an expert in that discipline. They're not perfect. They're not the best in the world and know everything. But once you sort of pull on those strings, that's where you get to that point. So I think that, again, being in a position where as a leader, in a one-on-one, that if there is an action item, it's really about someone coming back for you to sign off on, I call it. So it's like, Seth Godin said this one time, he's like, don't bring me an empty bingo square sheet. Bring me it with 2 numbers not filled in and ask me how to fill those in. And so it's, when the complexity is big and you are a senior leader or a CEO and you're trying to solve all the things, you need somebody to come with like, I can't get this to connect to this, and you can help them do that. And they have to do most of the work though. 98% there, we say. So.
Yes. Yeah, love it. Thank you. Give me something to say yes to. I love that. It's a great line. So thank you for this. This has been great. Literally a mini masterclass for any leader, really, and thinking about, how do I adopt more of a coaching, question-based mindset especially in most one-to-ones, which come up for so many of us, right? So often. We're kind of probably drawing to the end of our time here, James, but I'd love to ask really one of my favorite questions, which is, as you continue to grow the business and actually multiply your impact in the world, what's the stretch for you? So where might you need to reinvent yourself to create a new level of impact that's not even on the radar today? What comes up when I say that?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is that my team would tell you that I am obsessed with the tiniest of details, and I have to fly at 50,000 feet. And as we've grown the organization, I've done a good job of helping people understand how important those little details are. But sometimes, again, back to that, seeing what no one else sees or putting priority on it even. How we do anything is how we do everything, is a saying. And I live a lot of my life that way. And I think the big stretch for me as we go, we're entering the US market, we hope one day to be, across the pond, as they would say, and we've done a good job of conquering Canada, is being able to really invest and institute a way of thinking within senior leaders that does that minutia and 50,000 feet the way I'm doing it today. And that requires me to step away from that. And that's a really hard thing to do, because the biggest thing for me, I have 3 responsibilities in the organization: culture, capital, and connection. And so I've got to be the person that is the most connected to all the people we serve or work with, and most importantly, the team. I've got to make sure that the culture, my job title, as you would know, is custodian of culture and chief empowerment officer. So I say that because the culture is what it is today. We've built it. I just have to show up with a mop bucket sometimes and mop it up when they mess it up, but and empower people to do great things. I think CEO should be Chief Empowerment Officer for every leader, but that's for another day. And then capitalize the organization. And it's really hard to focus on making sure that the business is capitalized for the growth we want if I'm stuck in the details. And so that's the big stretch, is relinquishing a little bit of that, but having stewards or other custodians of those minute details, so that I can make sure that those big things continue to happen. Because I think that Righteous, for what we've done and what we represent and who we are and what we built, really has the opportunity to make some big waves in the world, like the Patagonias and the Ben and Jerry's, and we want to do that. Our vision is to be the most loved, inspired frozen dessert company in the world, and I think that's a big stretch, and I'm excited for it, is what I would say.
James, that's beautiful. Being the custodian of culture, right? It works when you're kind of at the smaller end, and then as you start to scale, you need to have seeding it so that it grows and lives when you're not present. Especially when you have to be in different international locations, when you can't be there to embody it every single day. I see that a lot. So perhaps one distinction I'll leave you with is around company culture and leadership culture. And you might think they're the same, but they're not necessarily the same, because company culture is more like what the employees experience and, whether you have how the overall feel. But actually, they're kind of like the leadership reflexes that you need in order to create that culture is another thing that I often see my clients need to scale in the business and build that same leadership operating system, if you like, so that when you're not there, other people are keeping the standards where they need to be and understand the importance of that.
You made me think of something that's really powerful, and I think it's another great question. Repeat it back to me. So I think that, what you just said to me that I, mentally took note of was, if I were to ask my senior leaders what that culture is that I represent within our operating system as leaders, could they say it back to me and then deliver on that? And I think that's a really great thing for me to take away from my conversations this afternoon. So thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. So James, it's been a lot of fun. I've loved kind of sparring with you on, on the gelato business as a whole, diving into great insights, around accountability, right? That it's not just to the leader, but it's actually to, your colleagues or your stakeholders, the team that you're part of, not making rules for the one person that, is abusing the system or whatever. And then asking these questions in order to learn more, in order to empower, and giving some really practical examples of where you go there. And then, being a bit open about, how are you going to be able to let go of some of that control, in order almost to control it at a higher level and make sure the standards are there as you scale to the US, hopefully to Europe and beyond. So it's been a great conversation. So James, if people want to find out more about you or about the business, where should they go?
Yeah, righteousgelato.com, and then Righteous Gelato on any social feed. We sort of lean into Instagram and TikTok just based on the brand. And then on LinkedIn, just my name, James Boettcher. And if you search Righteous, it'll come up too. But reach out. I'd love to chat and meet some new people. And if you got any curious questions about culture or leadership, happy to say this advice is only as good as you paid for it, which is $0, and maybe share something back. So appreciate the opportunity, Richard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Well, that's a wrap. If you received value from this conversation, please do leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. We'd deeply appreciate it. And if you'd like to check out the show notes from this episode, head to xquadrant.com/podcast, where you'll find all the details. Now, finally, when you're in top leadership, who supports and challenges you at a deep level to help you multiply your impact? Discover more about the different ways we can support you at xquadrant.com.